Everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice 16-game college basketball slate that starts at 12:15. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It helps the channel a lot. I really do appreciate it. This slate is pretty crazy, not quite as crazy as yesterday's, but it should be crazy nonetheless. There's a lot of games, a lot of players to go through, but we do have a lot of variety in these games. We got a lot of lopsided games, a lot of tight games, a lot of scoring all over the place, but we do have some up-tempo games, some close games as well, so we'll get into that as we go. So we're gonna just get through and start with each team and kind of give my thoughts here. So first of all, we're gonna look at Northwestern and FAU. Now Northwestern and FAU are actually pretty similar in their KenPom ratings. However, I do think that FAU is a dangerous team. But looking at their teams in general, Northwestern has some guys that can really play, and that's Barnhizer and Bowie. They are a little bit pricey, but they definitely have a lot of upside today. I would probably take Barnhizer first over and then Bowie, and then Langbor also has some utility today, but he definitely carries a little bit of risk. But his price is still pretty good. As for FAU, with this game, having a pretty decent total, it definitely has some potential as a solid game. With Golden being a little bit overpriced, but Jonell Davis is actually underpriced today, so he's definitely somebody to consider. And then Elijah Martin is a GPP only play on this one, so do keep that in mind. But I do think that there's some utility in that particular game. Then we're going to look at the next game here, and that's Colgate and Baylor. Now Colgate is favored to lose this game by 14 points, and it's a pretty average total, about 140 points on this one. So to keep that in mind here. But with that said, we do have some players we do like from this game. We're going to start by looking at Colgate and look at Braden Smith. Now he's by far the best player on their team, and he should get a lot of opportunity here. He's also a little bit cheaper than other options when it comes to being like the best player on a team. And if you think that this game can stay close at all, then he would definitely be somebody to consider as he's got some good upside. Then we'll look at Baylor here, and we do like Ray J. Dennis and also Missy here. Both these guys have a lot of potential today, and they're a little bit. Missy is actually just underpriced here. I really do like him a lot. Sorry, I meant to put him in here um, along with John L. Davis. Sorry about that. All right. Okay, I'm gonna sort of just build the thing as I go here. Anyhow, so those are my two uh, favorite players from Baylor here. But you could also look at Jacoby Walter, though he is squarely a GPP play today, so do keep that in mind. Moving up to the UAB San Diego State game. San Diego State's favored to win this game by 6.5 points. It also has a similar total for the first three games, and so that definitely has this game being an interesting play game to pull some guys from. However, most of the guys on this game are kind of secondary plays. But in that case, for UAB, we're going to look at Lindenberg, Vasquez. Uh, oops, sorry about that. Lindenberg, Vasquez, and Ephraim Johnson. They all have some utility today, but they're mostly secondary plays. And then for San Diego State, Ledee has some potential on this one, though he's fairly expensive, and I think they're better players at his price point, but he's good contrarian play if you want to do that from the price point that he's at. Looking at Western Kentucky and Marquette here. Now this game does feature a higher total, 158 points. Unfortunately, there's not much to like from this game because they're a little bit overpriced, and with this game being a pretty uh, favorable game in Marquette's favor, it's going to be hard to really like Western Kentucky, even though they have some decent plays, and they do have a couple injuries, as does Marquette with both Kolek and Iguodaro questionable, or at least having some question to how healthy they are. That's going to carry a lot of risk in this game, so it's a very avoidable game from that perspective, at least until we get some good news on those guys. Looking at Stetson and UConn here, uh, the only guy I really like from this game at all is Klingon, but he definitely carries some risk today. This game has a lower total than I thought it would have, but it's also a 26 point favorite and UConn's favorite, so the blowout is likely, and so it's going to be hard to really roster anybody from either of those two teams simply because that blowout potential is high. Then we're going to look at the next game here, New Mexico and Clemson. Now this is going to be an interesting game for fantasy because they do have some guys that can play here, and it's got a pretty high total, 151 points, and it's also a tight game with this 2-point spread in New Mexico's favor. Now Jalen House and JT Toppin are both guys I like and would consider rostering on this slate, though they're going to be a little bit harder to roster with their price tags. I do think Donovan Dent is a little bit underpriced today, so that definitely gives him some utility. Um, but he's not a must play, but I do like him as a decent play. Then we're going to look at Jamal Mashburn Jr. as another option, but he's definitely going to carry some risk there. Looking at some of the guys on Clemson, the top play of the slate is here with PJ Hall. He's one of my favorite plays on the slate overall, and so he's very close to being a must play on the slate. I also like Gerard and Scheifelen as kind of two GPP type plays, but they definitely carry a little bit of risk here. But PJ Hall is definitely one of my favorite plays on the slate overall, and he's a great option. Looking at Yale and Auburn, this game does have a good total of 140 points. Auburn is favored to win by some, but I do think Yale might muck this game up some, and this just makes this game really avoidable from a fantasy perspective because Auburn is a very good defensive team, and while Yale is they kind of play a strange style of basketball, so I think it could just back it up and get kind of crazy. And Auburn's overpriced today, so they're pretty avoidable, though Johnny Braum does have some utility. Looking at Colorado and Florida, this game does feature one of the highest totals on the slate, 160 points. Now, this is very interesting because Florida has some injuries, and Colorado also has uh, some upside here. So, for Colorado first, KJ Simpson and De Silva both have really top tier options on the slate, but they're going to be extremely hard to roster. At least Simpson will be due to his price. But he's a great option, and so he's definitely somebody to consider today. Looking at De Silva, he also has some utility on this one, but he's not as top tier of an option as Simpson is. But he's actually a little bit underpriced here, so he's definitely somebody to consider. Looking at Florida, um, we have Hanglatten out, and this is going to open up two guys, both Thomas Hogg and Alex Condon, but both their guys' prices have come up some, but they do have some upside today. They do carry a little bit of risk. And then Aberdeen also has some GPP upside, as does Samuel. I felt like Florida is a little bit pricey, though, for this slate. I think Colorado's a little bit better, but you could definitely pull some GPP plays from Florida as well. Moving into the Texas A&M Nebraska game, this game features a 1-point spread in Nebraska's favor, and it has a decent total here at 147 points. We do have some upside plays in this game, two from Texas A&M, both being Wade Taylor and Tyler Radford. If Texas A&M is going to win this game, they're going to need good efforts from both those guys, and they're fairly priced for their potential today. Looking at Nebraska, we do like Bryce Williams a lot. He has some nice upside here, and he's got a favorable matchup. Looking at Anderson Garcia, he's squarely a GPP play. Uh, sorry, that's from Texas A&M too. I just misread my thing here. He's squarely a GPP play here, but he definitely has some utility here. Sorry, 5,600. He's an interesting play. There's definitely a game that I could avoid a little bit, but they do have some guys that make it worthwhile, make it at least look decent on this one. Looking at the Vermont Duke game here, we do feature a 12-point spread in Duke's favor, but this has a pretty low total, 132 points. There's really only two guys I like at all here, and that's for Duke, and that's Filipowski. Obviously, he's pretty expensive. He's good as a secondary option. He's good a good alternative to if you try to roster Edey but don't want to and you want to go with Filipowski, you could do that. I'm going to go the other way and not use Edey or Filipowski today. Tyrese Proctor also has some utility today, but he definitely carries a lot of risk. He's kind of an upside risk option on the slate. Looking at Purdue and Grambling here, we have obviously a couple guys that are good on Purdue, and obviously Zach Edey is the best player in the country right now. And he's got a favorable game here with a 26-point spread. He definitely carries some risk in this one, so he definitely has a high potential, but I don't love him. I just think he's a good play. As for Lance Jones, he's kind of a good GPP play on this slate, but he definitely carries some risk. And Braden Smith is questionable, so that, or at least has some injury concerns. So we do have to kind of pay attention to that there. So moving into the next game here, Charleston and Alabama. Is that right? Yeah. Sorry. Um, we feature quite a few game players in this game that I do think has some utility. Looking at this total, it's 173 points, which is one of the highest on the slate. Only that Florida game was even close. This one's at 100. That was 160. This is over 13 points more. So there's a lot of options from this game. I'm going to clear this so I can kind of pinpoint these guys here. So first for College of Charleston, they are going to have some opportunity to get up and down the court and score. And then so Smith here is definitely going to be a guy that can do it. I also like Ante Brazovic as a good option, and Kobe Rogers is a good option. If I look over at Alabama, though, this is where we're going to get two really big time options here, and Mr. Sears and in Estrada. They both have a lot of potential in this game. And then Grant Nelson's a secondary option at the forward position for them, though he's not a must play because he's a little bit pricey for his potential. But I do expect these two teams to absolutely go up and down the floor a ton and score a lot of points. So do keep that in mind. Looking at Longwood, and Houston, this is probably one of the most avoidable games on the slate. This is going to get out of hand early. I don't see any reason to roster uh, either one of these teams for that much too much here. I mean, if you really wanted to use Sheed, you could, or Sharp, but I just don't think that there's going to be much utility in doing that, especially with the uh, big spread and 128 point total, which is really the lowest on the slate, and so this is going to be a pretty avoidable game in general. Looking at Wisconsin and JMU, this game does feature a 145 point total and 5.5 point spread in Wisconsin's favor. However, Wisconsin does play Wisconsin basketball, so that is a concern here. Terrence Edwards for JMU is probably the best play from them, as he's a high usage option. But Biggerstaff is also a decent value play on this one. He definitely carries some risk though. And then Friedel and Brown are both kind of contrarian or secondary plays for this slate, but they do have some good upside. And then if we look at Wisconsin, Storr is probably my favorite play from the team. Though he's pricey, he has some good potential in this one. Looking at TCU and Utah State here, TCU is favored by 3 points, and that's 150 point total, which is on the higher end of the slate. They definitely have some guys that we can look at as interesting plays. Emmanuel Miller is one of the really good options for this entire slate. He's a top tier play on this one, and so I do like him quite a bit. I do think we have some GPP plays in Jameer Nelson, Micah Peavy, Ernest Odu, and Chuck O'Bannon, but they definitely carry some risk as they're kind of risky value plays. But looking at Utah State here, Osavar is a great option. He's got some decent upside here, and so is Darius Brown. But they're not must plays on here. They're kind of secondary. Brown, though, is kind of close to being a core play. And then Isaac Johnson, we get a lot of nice little boost if he gets into the starting lineup. I just don't necessarily expect that at this point. We'll have to wait and see about that. And then finally, we'll look at this last game here, and that is Grand Canyon and St. Mary's. Now, St. Mary's favored to win this game by 5.5 points. Now, this has got a very low total, 131 points. St. Mary's does have a couple players that have some utility here, but and Mitchell Saxon is the best play from the game when it comes to his price and his upside. But you could also look at the other two big plays, Dukas and Marcianonis, not Dukas, I'm sorry, Mahoney and Marcianonis for St. Mary's, and then for Grand Canyon, Grant Foster does carry some potential today, but if this game gets out of hand early, he could not be having a great game. With that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.